Kia ora, hello, I'm Philip Duncan. Thank you very much for joining us. We're tracking a fair bit of weather at the moment. A cooler change in New Zealand. A tropical depression has formed in Vanuatu and might become a cyclone by this weekend, and severe thunderstorms around Melbourne this morning. You can see those thunderstorms here on the satellite imagery coming in around the Victoria area. Over in New Zealand, not much going on after the thunderstorms we've seen the last couple of days. Now we're getting into a slightly cooler southerly flow, and up in the tropics, this is the area where that tropical depression has formed right there, and so we'll be keeping a very close eye on that because it might turn into a tropical cyclone. Now, if it does, it's likely to be quite short-lived because it is tracking from the tropics straight down to the Tasman Sea. So that's going to give it a fairly short window while it's in the tropics to have that tropical name. But at this stage, a moderate risk. We said the other day that the Fiji Met Service had a low risk because it's so far out. They've now lifted that up to a moderate risk of a cyclone forming. By the way, at the same time they've done that, the modelling's actually backed off a wee bit, but that's the nature of modelling. It's sort of a little bit moves one way this day, that way the next day, and it takes a fine eye in the middle to sort of see what's going on. So on the animated wind map, you can see that tropical depression that's formed up here around Vanuatu. Not a storm, although it will be producing thunderstorms. Down here, speaking of thunderstorms, the humid northerly winds, that's the reason why we saw those severe thunderstorms around Melbourne this morning. And look at the southerly flow around New Zealand. The greener colouring means that it's not quite so warm around the South Island today, and that's certainly been reflected with the temperatures. The North Island, that humid weather's been pushed out to sea, even further east of the Chatham Islands. So let's get into the forecast. Here is Friday, 24 hours worth of rainfall. As you can see, most of New Zealand is dry under this big high pressure zone, 1030 hectopascals. The pale blue shading, remember it's 24 hours worth of rain, right down here, 0.2 millimetres. So what that means is while it shows up all along from Gisborne all the way to Kaitaia basically, it really just means in that area there's the risk of some showers. So it'll be a little bit cloudy, there might be a drizzle patch or a light isolated shower or two. It certainly doesn't mean everyone's got wet weather. Now as we go into the weekend, you can see the tropical depression up here, you can see the high pressure zone keeping New Zealand dry, and over in Australia, more downpours coming into Victoria. But I think it's Sunday that gets a little bit more interesting. We've got this low here near New Caledonia. May well be a tropical cyclone by then. The air pressure in today's modelling, not quite as deep as it was yesterday. The air pressure is not how we measure a cyclone though, it's the wind speed around the centre. So if it gets to gale force here, that's when it gets named by the Fiji Met Service because it's east of the Tasman. That's how you name cyclones. You draw a line down the Tasman Sea, west of it's named by Australia, east of it's named by Fiji. So this one will be in the Fiji territory, but New Zealand is still dry on Sunday. When we get to next week, you can see that low getting closer to us, but it's still mostly dry and settled across New Zealand. But Tuesday's map does show a bit more of an interesting story. This is when that low comes out of the tropics. It's not a storm based on this modelling, although there could be gale force winds here. That's the squash zone between low pressure and nearby high pressure. So halfway between the low and the high, you'll get those windy nor'easters. Humidity is going to go up. As that red line gets pulled down, that is this tropical depression pulling down the tropical moisture with it through the atmosphere. So if you thought it was humid the last few days in northern New Zealand, get ready because the overnight lows are going to be around 22 degrees, and with humidity near 100%, the feels like temperature, the humidex, will be around 30 degrees. It's going to feel like you're up in the tropics. So that's going to be coming down. Now remember with Cyclone Cody, each model kept sort of moving it further and further out to the east. Well, guess what happens with this one if that happens? Because as storms come down or as tropical lows come down, they get caught up in the roaring 40s, so they get pulled to the east. So if this low continues to be pulled to the east, it gives the North Island a much better chance of rain. And rain's important because we are teetering on drought in some areas like Auckland and Waikato and even some parts of Taranaki along that western side of the North Island. So we're keeping a close eye on this, but there's a lot going on. And by the way, another big rainmaker for Alice Springs, another 40 odd millimetres coming in for them. So Alice Springs, the desert of Australia, much wetter than many parts of New Zealand's North Island so far this month. That's all from me. We'll be back again tomorrow with our next update on this tropical depression.